The massive warship moved through the empty space between stars like a metal beast hunting for prey. Its name was the Eternal Vigilance, and it belonged to the Galactic Coalition, an alliance of 12 alien species who had ruled this part of the galaxy for thousands of years. Today, the ship carried something special in its holding cells, something that had never been captured alive before. A human. Ambassador Tova stood before the containment cell with her arms crossed behind her back. She was a Morellian, a species known for their 4 eyes and blue-gray skin. Her people were diplomats, trained from birth to read emotions and find weaknesses in their enemies. But as she looked at the creature sitting calmly inside the cell, she found nothing to read. The human male sat on the floor with his legs crossed. He wore the torn remains of a flight suit, and there was dried blood on his forehead from a small cut. His ship had been destroyed 3 days ago during a border skirmish, and he had been floating in an escape pod when the Eternal Vigilance found him. His name, according to the translation device, was Park Do-hyun. "It shows no fear," said Commander Reese, who stood beside Tova. He was a Volcarian, a reptilian species with green scales and yellow eyes. His tail twitched nervously as he watched the human. "Our sensors must be broken." "The sensors are working perfectly," Tova replied. "I have checked them 3 times. This was the problem with humans. They did not behave the way they were supposed to behave. The Coalition had been at war with humanity for 3 years now, and in that time, they had learned many strange things about these creatures from the planet called Earth. Earth was what scientists called a death world. The gravity was strong. The weather was violent. The planet was filled with dangerous predators, poisonous plants, and diseases that could kill in hours. By all logic, nothing intelligent should have evolved there. And yet humans had not only survived, they had become the dominant species. They had done this, the scientists believed, by being completely insane. Humans formed emotional bonds with predators. They kept wolves in their homes and called them pets. They swam with sharks for fun. They climbed mountains that could kill them just to see the view from the top. They ate plants that caused them pain because they enjoyed the taste. And now one of these crazy creatures sat in a cell on the Eternal Vigilance, looking around with what appeared to be mild curiosity. Do-hyun noticed the 2 aliens watching him. He raised one hand and gave a small wave. "Did it just greet us?" Reese asked, his scales rippling with confusion. "It appears so. We destroyed its ship. We killed its crewmates. We are holding it prisoner." "Yes, and it waved at us." Tova did not respond. She was too busy thinking. The High Council wanted information from this human. They wanted to know about Earth's defenses, about their fleet movements, about their weapons. But every interrogation method they had tried on captured humans had failed. Physical pain did not break them. They seemed almost to expect it, to have prepared for it their entire lives. Psychological manipulation did not work either. Humans had a strange ability to find hope in hopeless situations. One captured human had spent 6 months in isolation and had emerged singing songs and telling jokes. Another had been subjected to sensory deprivation and had used the time to compose poetry in his head. They were, in a word, unbreakable. "I have a proposal," Tova said slowly. "What kind of proposal?" "The High Council wants us to send a message to the humans, to show them that we are not afraid of their species." She paused. "We have the Varax cubs on board." Commander Reese went very still. "Ambassador, that would be murder. It would be an execution. There is a difference. The Varax are not executioners. They are monsters." Tova turned all 4 of her eyes to the commander. "The humans do not know that. They have never encountered the Varax. Imagine what they will think when they see one of their people torn apart by our war beasts." Reese was quiet for a long moment. The Varaks were the most dangerous predators the Coalition had ever encountered. They came from a planet with gravity twice as strong as Earth's, where everything was a killer and only the strongest survived. A single adult Varaks had once destroyed an entire security team, 15 armed soldiers, in less than 2 minutes. Even the cubs were deadly. They were born with claws that could cut through metal and teeth that could crush bone. Their instincts told them to kill anything that showed fear. "The cubs are unpredictable," Reese said finally. "We cannot control what they will do. We do not need to control them. We simply need to put the human in a room with them and let nature take its course." Tova smiled, a cold expression that did not reach her eyes. "The whole crew can watch. It will be good for morale. And if the human surrenders information to avoid this fate, then we gain valuable intelligence. Either way, we win." Reese looked back at the human in the cell. Do-hyun had lain down on the floor and appeared to be sleeping, using his arm as a pillow. He looked peaceful, almost content. "Very well," the commander said. "I will make the arrangements." Inside the cell, Do-hyun was not actually sleeping. He was thinking. He had been a farmer before the war, working on his family's land outside the city of Bizan. His grandmother had raised animals there, dogs mostly, including several breeds that other people feared. She had taught him many things about creatures that could kill. The most important lesson was simple. Fear was a choice. Animals could smell fear. They could hear it in your heartbeat and see it in the way you moved. If you showed fear, you became prey. But if you stayed calm, if you breathed slowly and moved carefully, even the most dangerous animal would hesitate. Do-hyun had no idea what the aliens were planning for him. He had heard them talking through the cell wall, their strange language translated by the device in his ear. They mentioned something called Varaks, and the way they said the word told him it was something terrible. But fear would not help him. Fear never helped anyone. So instead, he thought about home. He thought about his mother's cooking, about the smell of rain on the farm, about his grandmother's gentle hands teaching him to approach a frightened dog. He thought about the sky over Korea, wide and blue and beautiful. Whatever came next, he would face it the way his grandmother had taught him. With patience, with calm, with an open hand instead of a closed fist. The cell door opened and 2 armed guards stepped inside. "Human," one of them said. "Come with us." Do-hyun stood up slowly, keeping his movements smooth and non-threatening. He looked at the guards and smiled. "Okay," he said simply. The guards exchanged confused looks. They had expected resistance, maybe even violence. They had been warned that humans were dangerous, that they fought like cornered animals. But this human just walked between them calmly, as if he was going for a pleasant stroll. They led him through long metal hallways filled with aliens who stopped to stare. Some looked curious. Others looked afraid. A few looked hungry, as if they were anticipating a good show. Do-hyun noticed all of this, but kept walking. He kept breathing slowly. He kept his heart rate steady. Somewhere ahead, something was waiting for him. Something that made even these aliens nervous. He would face it the same way he faced everything else. One breath at a time. The arena was a large circular room at the center of the ship. It had been built for training exercises, a place where soldiers could practice combat without damaging important equipment. The floor was bare metal, smooth and cold. The walls curved upward to a viewing gallery where hundreds of aliens had gathered to watch. Word had spread quickly through the eternal vigilance. A human was going to face the Varaks cubs. No one wanted to miss this. Ambassador Tova stood in the center of the viewing gallery, surrounded by officers and diplomats. She had dressed in her finest robes for the occasion, dark purple fabric that showed her high rank. This was supposed to be a moment of triumph, a demonstration of coalition power. But something felt wrong. She watched as the guards brought the human into the arena. He walked calmly between them, looking around at the metal walls and the watching crowd with what appeared to be mild interest. He did not struggle. He did not beg. He simply walked. "Remove the restraints," Tova commanded through the speaker system. The guards hesitated, then did as they were told. The metal cuffs fell away from Do-yoon's wrists. He rubbed them gently, then looked up at the viewing gallery. "Thank you," he said. His voice was quiet but clear. A ripple of confusion passed through the crowd. The human was thanking them? For what? For the privilege of being killed? "Human," Tova's voice echoed through the arena. "You have been brought here to face judgment for your crimes against the Galactic Coalition." Do-hyun tilted his head slightly, listening. "You will face the Varax. If you survive, you will be granted a quick death. If you do not—" She paused. "Well, the Varax will decide. What is a Varax?" Do-hyun asked. The question seemed to amuse the crowd. Several aliens laughed, a sound like breaking glass and grinding stones mixed together. The human truly had no idea what was coming. Tova smiled coldly. "You will see soon enough." She gestured to an officer, who pressed a button on his console. On the far side of the arena, a large door began to slide open. Do-hyun turned to face it. The first thing he heard was breathing. Heavy, wet breathing, like a large dog after a long run. Then he heard claws on metal, a clicking sound that echoed through the silent arena. 3 shapes emerged from the darkness. They were about the size of large dogs, but that was where the similarity ended. Their bodies were covered in dark fur with strange stripes that seemed to glow faintly in the artificial light. They had 6 legs instead of 4, each one ending in curved claws that looked sharp enough to cut steel. Their faces were flat and wide, with large amber eyes that reflected the light like mirrors. When they opened their mouths, Do-hyun saw rows of teeth. Not just one row, like earth animals, but 3 rows, layered behind each other like a shark's. The Varax cubs. A murmur went through the crowd. These were not the largest cubs, not the oldest ones. They were perhaps 6 months old, barely past the weaning stage. But they were still deadly. A single bite from those jaws could remove a limb. The 3 cubs spread out as they entered the arena, moving with the practiced coordination of pack hunters. Their eyes fixed on Do-hyun, tracking his every movement. Low growls rose from their throats, a sound that seemed to vibrate in his chest. In a viewing gallery, Commander Reese leaned forward. "The human is not running." "It has nowhere to run," Tova replied. "No, look at it. It is not even trying to back away." It was true. Do-hyun stood perfectly still in the center of the arena, watching the cubs approach. His hands hung loose at his sides. His breathing was slow and steady. The cubs seemed confused by this. They had expected prey behavior. They had expected fear, panic, the desperate scramble of a creature trying to escape death. Instead, the strange 2-legged animal just stood there, looking at them. The largest cub, the leader of the small pack, crept closer. Its ears lay flat against its head, and its growl grew louder. It was trying to frighten the human, to make him run. Do-hyun did something unexpected. He sat down. The movement was slow and deliberate. He lowered himself to the metal floor, crossing his legs beneath him like he was settling in for a long wait. Then he placed his hands on his knees, palms facing upward, and went still. "What is it doing?" someone in the crowd asked. "Perhaps it has accepted death," another suggested. "No," Tova said slowly, her 4 eyes narrowing. "Look at its posture. That is not surrender." Do-hyun was remembering his grandmother's lessons now. When you face a scared or aggressive animal, she had told him, you have 2 choices. You can try to be bigger, louder, more threatening. Sometimes that works. Sometimes it makes things worse. Or you can do the opposite. Make yourself small. Make yourself quiet. Show the animal that you are not a threat. Most predators did not want to fight. Fighting was dangerous. Even the winner could be hurt, and an injury in the wild often meant death. Predators preferred easy prey, creatures that ran and screamed and made themselves obvious targets. But what happened when the prey did not run? What happened when it sat down and waited? The cubs did not know. This was not in their instincts. They had been born knowing how to chase, how to kill, how to tear apart anything that showed weakness. But sitting, stillness, that was not weakness. That was something else entirely. The largest cub stopped its advance. It was only a few meters from Do-yoon now, close enough to attack. But it did not attack. It stood there, head tilted, studying this strange creature. Do-yoon made a small sound. A soft clicking with his tongue, the same sound he used to call the dogs on his grandmother's farm. The sound meant nothing to the Virax, but the tone did. It was gentle, calm, inviting. He extended one hand slowly, palm facing upward, fingers relaxed. The crowd held its breath. The cub's ears came forward slightly. Its growl faded to a low rumble, more confused than threatening. It took a hesitant step closer, then another. "This is impossible," Reese breathed. Tova said nothing. She could not speak. She was watching something that should not be happening, something that went against everything she knew about the Virax. The cub stretched its neck forward, bringing its massive head close to Do-yoon's hand. Its nostrils flared as it breathed in his scent. Humans, it turned out, smelled strange. Not like prey, not like predator. Something in between. Something new. The cub's nose touched Do-yoon's palm. And then, to the shock of everyone watching, it licked him. Do-yoon smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it was real. The cub's tongue was rough like sandpaper, and its breath smelled like old meat. But he had faced worse on the farm. Slowly, carefully, he raised his hand and scratched behind the cub's ear. The effect was immediate. The cub's eyes half closed. The rumble in its throat changed, becoming deeper, almost rhythmic. It was not a growl anymore, it was a purr. The other two cubs watched their leader with obvious confusion. This was not hunting. This was not killing. This was something they had never seen before. But it looked nice. The second cub, smaller and more curious, crept forward. It pushed against Do-yoon's shoulder with its head, demanding attention. He laughed softly and reached out with his other hand, giving it the same gentle scratches. In the viewing gallery, Ambassador Tova gripped the railing so hard, her knuckles turned white. "How is this possible?" she whispered. No one had an answer. Time passed strangely in the arena. To the aliens watching from above, it felt like hours. To Do-yoon, sitting on the cold metal floor with two massive predators pressing against him, it felt like minutes. The largest cub had claimed his right side, lying with its heavy head in his lap. He could feel its hot breath through the thin fabric of his prisoner uniform. Its eyes were half closed. Every few seconds it made that strange purring sound, a deep vibration that he could feel in his bones. The second cub had settled against his left shoulder, practically leaning on him. It was heavier than it looked. Do-yoon guessed it weighed at least 40 kilograms, maybe more. Its fur was softer than he had expected, thick and warm despite the cold air of the arena. But it was the third cub that surprised him most. The smallest of the three had been watching from a distance, unsure. It had circled the group several times, making soft whining sounds that reminded Do-yoon of a puppy wanting to join play. But, afraid of the older dogs. Now it stood directly in front of him, amber eyes wide and uncertain. "Come here," Do-yoon said softly. "It is okay." The cub did not understand his words, but it understood his tone. Gentle, warm, safe. Crept forward, belly low to the ground, until it was close enough to touch. Then, with a sudden burst of confidence, it climbed directly into his lap. There was not really room. The largest cub was already there, taking up most of the available space. But the smallest cub did not care. It wiggled and pushed until it had made a spot for itself. Its body pressed against Do-hyun's chest. Its head tucked under his chin, and then it began to purr. The sound was different from the others. Higher and softer, like a motor running in the distance. Do-hyun could feel the vibration against his heart. He smiled in the viewing gallery. Chaos had broken out. Scientists were arguing with officers. Officers were shouting at each other. Ambassador Tova stood in the center of it all, her 4 eyes fixed on the arena below, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. This is not possible. Chief Science Officer Mira kept repeating. Her species communicated through tentacle movements as much as words, and right now her tentacles were writhing frantically. The Voraks are apex predators. They do not form bonds outside their own species. They certainly do not form bonds with prey animals. Then explain what we are seeing, Commander Reese demanded. I cannot explain it. That is my point. It should not be happening, but it is happening. Obviously it is happening. I have eyes. I can see it happening. That does not mean I can explain it. Tova raised one hand, and the room went quiet. The human, she said slowly, is doing something. Producing some chemical, some signal that we cannot detect. That is the only explanation. We have scanned him repeatedly, Mira protested. Every sensor we have. There is nothing unusual. No special pheromones. No sonic emissions. No psychic projection. He is just sitting there. Then run the scans again. I have run them 8 times already. Tova turned to look at the chief science officer. Then what are you telling me? That a simple human with no special abilities has somehow tamed 3 Voraks cubs through nothing but... What? Sitting down. Myra's tentacles went still. I am telling you, she said carefully, that I do not know. And neither does anyone else on this ship. Below, in the arena, Do-hyun had started humming Dot. It was an old song, one his grandmother used to sing while she worked in the garden. He did not remember all the words, but the tune was simple, rising and falling like waves on a beach. He hummed it softly, more to himself than to the cubs, but they seemed to like it. The largest cub shifted in his lap, pressing closer. The second cub's ears twitched in time with the melody. The smallest cub, still tucked under his chin, had fallen completely asleep. Do-hyun looked down at the sleeping creature and felt something unexpected. Affection. These animals had been brought here to kill him. They were weapons, tools of his execution. But they were also young, confused, probably scared. They had been taken from wherever they were born and put on a cold metal ship surrounded by aliens who saw them as nothing but monsters. No wonder they were aggressive. No wonder they attacked anything that showed fear. They were alone. But now, for this moment, they were not alone anymore. They had found something warm to press against, something that made soft sounds and gentle movements. Something that was not afraid of them. Do-hyun understood that feeling. He had felt it himself, floating in his escape pod after his ship was destroyed. Alone in the dark, waiting for someone to find him. Waiting for warmth. I know, he murmured to the sleeping cub. I know how it feels. The cub's ear twitched, but it did not wake up. Hours passed. The crowd in the viewing gallery changed as officers went to their shifts and others came to take their place. But there was always someone watching. Word had spread throughout the ship, and now everyone wanted to see the impossible thing happening in the arena. The human who had befriended the Voraks, some of the aliens were angry. They felt cheated. They had come to see blood and death, and instead they were watching a man pet some animals. Others were confused, unable to understand what they were seeing. A few, though they would never admit it, was something else entirely. Touched. There was something strangely beautiful about the scene below. The cold metal arena, built for violence. The deadly predators bred for war. And in the middle of it all, one small human, humming a song from home while monsters slept in his arms. Ambassador Tova watched longer than anyone else. She had studied humans for years. She had read every report, watched every recording, analyzed every piece of data the Coalition had collected. She knew about their death world origins, their strange persistence, their tendency to bond with dangerous creatures. But knowing something and seeing it were different. This human, this Park Do-yeon, had done something that should have been impossible. He had taken 3 deadly predators and turned them into pets. Not through strength, not through technology, not through any trick or weapon. Just patience, just calm, just sitting down and offering an open hand. What else could humans do with that ability? The thought was terrifying. "Commander," Tova said finally, her voice quiet. Reese stepped forward. "Yes, Ambassador." "Clear the arena. Bring the human to proper quarters. He is no longer a prisoner." "What?" "You heard me. Give him food, water, medical attention if he needs it. And keep those cubs with him." Reese stared at her. "Ambassador, the High Council wanted us to execute this human. They wanted to send a message. We have received a message instead," Tova replied. "And I intend to understand what it means." She turned and walked away, her robe sweeping behind her. In the arena below, Do-yeon had stopped humming. He looked up at the viewing gallery, somehow sensing that something had changed. He could not hear the conversations above, but he could feel it. The killing was not going to happen. He looked down at the 3 cubs pressed against him, warm and heavy and trusting. "I think we made some new friends," he said softly. The smallest cub yawned in its sleep, showing all 3 rows of teeth. Do-yeon laughed. The new quarters were nothing like the prison cell. Do-yeon stood in the doorway, looking around at the space they had given him. There was an actual bed against one wall, covered in soft blankets. A small table stood near the window, which showed a view of the stars outside. A separate room contained washing facilities. It was simple, but it was comfortable. It was meant for guests, not prisoners. The 3 cubs pushed past him before he could move, exploring the room with obvious excitement. The largest one immediately jumped onto the bed, rolling around on the blankets and making happy rumbling sounds. The second one found a corner and began scratching at the floor, trying to make a nest. The smallest stayed close to Do-yeon, pressing against his leg. "Well," Do-yeon said, "make yourselves at home, I guess." A voice came from behind him. "They seem to like it here." He turned to find Ambassador Tova standing in the doorway. She was smaller than he had expected, now that she was not hidden behind glass and metal. Her blue-gray skin was smooth, almost shiny, and her 4 eyes watched him with an expression he could not read. "May I come in?" she asked. "It is your ship," Do-yeon replied. "You do not need my permission." "Perhaps not, but I am asking anyway." He nodded and stepped aside. Tova entered slowly, keeping her distance from the cubs. The largest one on the bed raised its head and growled softly, but Do-yeon made a calming sound, and it settled back down. "How do you do that?" Tova asked. "Do what?" "Make them listen to you. The Varaks do not follow commands. We have tried for years to train them, to use them as proper weapons. They killed every trainer we sent." Do-yeon shrugged. "I am not commanding them. I am just talking. They decide if they want to listen. And they decide to listen to you. They are young. They want someone to follow. Someone who is not afraid of them." He paused, then added, "Someone who cares about them." Tova was quiet for a moment, processing this. "You care about them," she said finally. "These creatures that were meant to kill you. They did not choose to kill me. You chose that for them. They are just babies, doing what their instincts tell them. Da-hyun looked at the smallest cub, still pressed against his leg. It is not their fault that their instincts were going to get me killed. Most species would hate them for that. Most species have not spent 10,000 years living with wolves. Tova tilted her head, all four eyes focusing on him. Explain. Da-hyun sat down on the edge of the bed, careful not to disturb the large cub spread across the blankets. The smallest cub immediately climbed up beside him, settling into his lap. Wolves are predators on my world, he said. Pack hunters. Dangerous. They killed humans. Humans killed them. We were enemies for a very long time. And then, somehow, we became friends. No one knows exactly how it happened. Maybe some wolves were less afraid of humans than others. Maybe some humans were patient enough to earn their trust. But slowly, over thousands of years, wolves became dogs. And dogs became our partners. Tova sat down in the chair by the table, her robe settling around her. You domesticated a predator. We did not domesticate them. We joined them. They kept us warm at night. They warned us when danger was coming. They helped us hunt. And we fed them, protected their pups, gave them a home. Da-hyun smiled slightly. It was not one species using another. It was two species deciding they were stronger together. Your people did this with other predators as well. Many others, cats, horses, hawks, even some creatures that could kill us easily. We seem to be good at making friends. Tova leaned forward. That is exactly what concerns me. Concerns you? We have been at war with your species for 3 years. In that time, we have captured 17 humans. All 17 survived whatever we did to them. We could not break them through pain. We could not break them through isolation. We could not break them through anything we tried. She gestured at the cubs. And now I see you sitting with 3 of our deadliest war beasts, scratching them behind the ears like pets. I brought you here to be killed, and instead you have made allies. They are not allies. They are friends. That is even worse. Da-hyun did not understand. He waited for her to explain. Friends are more dangerous than allies, Tova said. Allies can be bought. Allies can be threatened. Allies can be convinced to change sides when the situation changes. But friends, she shook her head. Friends will die for each other. Friends will fight against impossible odds. Friends do not give up. Is that bad? For your enemies? Yes, very bad. There was a long silence. The second cub had finished making its nest in the corner and was now curled up, watching the conversation with half-closed eyes. The large cub on the bed had fallen asleep, its massive body rising and falling with slow breaths. What are you going to do with me? Da-hyun asked finally. I do not know yet. Tova stood up, walking to the window. The stars outside were cold and distant. The High Council wants me to execute you. They want to send a message to your people that we are not afraid. But you are afraid. She turned sharply. Excuse me? You are afraid of humans. That is why you are at war with us. Not because we did anything to threaten you, but because we exist and you do not understand us. Da-hyun spoke calmly, without anger. We are the thing that does not make sense. The creature from the death world that should have died, but did not. The species that befriends monsters. We are not afraid. Then why did you put me in that arena? Why did you gather your whole ship to watch? You wanted to prove something. You wanted to prove the humans could be killed like any other animal. He gestured at the cubs. But that is not what happened. Tova stared at him. No one had ever spoken to her like this. She was an ambassador, one of the highest ranks in the coalition. People bowed to her. People feared her. This human did neither. You are very strange, she said finally. Da-Yun laughed. I have been told that before. Your people are going to be a problem. Not just for this war, but for the entire galaxy. Maybe. He shrugged. Or maybe we will be friends. It depends on what you choose. What do you mean? Right now, we are enemies because you decided we should be. We did not attack you. We did not threaten you. We were just living on our little planets, minding our own business, and you came to us with warships. Da-Hyun looked at her steadily. But enemies can become friends. It happened with the wolves. It can happen with you. It is not that simple. It is exactly that simple. You just have to decide that you want it. The smallest cub in his lap yawned and stretched, its claws extending for a moment before retracting. It looked up at Tova with curious amber eyes. Tova looked back at it. For the first time in years, she did not see a weapon. She saw an animal. Young and confused and far from home. Looking for somewhere to belong. Just like humans. Just like everyone. I need to think, she said quietly. About many things. Take your time. Do-Hyun settled back on the bed, careful not to wake the sleeping cub beside him. We are not going anywhere. Tova left without another word. But that night, alone in her quarters, she began to write a message to the High Council. A message that would change everything. 3 months had passed since the day in the arena. Park. Do-Hyun stood on the bridge of the Eternal Vigilance, watching through the massive windows as Earth grew larger against the stars. The blue and white marble floated in the darkness, beautiful and fragile, the only home his species had ever known. He had dreamed of seeing it again. During those long days in the prison cell, during the moment when he sat down in the arena and waited to die, during all the strange weeks that followed, he had dreamed of home. Now he was almost there. But he was not the same person who had left. A heavy weight pressed against his leg. Do-Hyun looked down at Barum, the largest of the 3 cubs. She was not really a cub anymore. In 3 months, she had grown to the size of a small horse, her dark fur thick and glossy, her amber eyes bright with intelligence. She pressed against him now the same way she had in the arena, seeking comfort and connection. He had named her Barum, which meant wind in his language, because she moved so fast when she ran that she seemed to fly. Her siblings lay nearby. Nuri, the second largest, was stretched across a console that the crew had learned to work around. His name meant world, because his curiosity seemed to cover everything, every corner of the ship, every new person he met. The smallest, Hanyul, was curled up directly in front of the captain's chair, blocking anyone from sitting there. Her name meant sky, for the way she always looked upward, watching the stars through the windows. The crew of the Eternal Vigilance had learned to live with them. It had not been easy at first. The Varaks were still predators, still dangerous, still capable of killing with a single bite. But they were also loyal now, attached to the strange human who had offered them kindness when everyone else offered fear. Where Do-Hyun went, they followed. Captain Tova stood beside him at the window. She was still an ambassador, still one of the most powerful figures in the coalition. But something had changed in her over the past months. She smiled more. She listened more. She had even allowed Hanyul to sleep in her quarters once, though she had complained about the fur on her blankets for days afterward. "Are you nervous?" she asked. "A little," Do-Hyun admitted. "My mother is going to have questions. About the war? About the peace negotiations? About the giant alien predators I am bringing home." Tova laughed. It was still a strange sound, coming from a Morellian, like wind chimes in a storm. But Do-Hyun had learned to like it. "What will you tell her?" He thought about it for a moment. "I will tell her they followed me home." The message Tova had sent to the High Council 3 months ago had been simple. She had described what happened in the arena. She had described the days that followed, as Do-Hyun and the cubs became inseparable. She had described her conversations with the human, his strange philosophy of friendship, his calm certainty that enemies could become allies. And then she had written her conclusion. We cannot win this war, not because humans are stronger than us, not because they have better weapons or more ships. We cannot win because they are not fighting the same war we are. We are fighting to destroy them. They are fighting to survive. And when this war is over, whether we win or lose, they will still be here. They will rebuild. They will recover. They will reach out to us again, not with weapons, but with open hands. And one day, maybe not soon, but eventually, we will have to decide what to do with those hands. We can slap them away. We can cut them off. Or we can take them. I suggest we take them now, while we still have a choice. The High Council had not been pleased. There had been arguments, threats, calls for Tova to be removed from her position. But she had stood firm. And slowly, painfully, other voices had joined hers. Not all aliens feared humans. Some were curious. Some were tired of war. Some had read the same reports Tova had read and reached the same conclusion. Humans were not going away. The only question was what kind of relationship the galaxy would have with them. The peace treaty had been signed 2 weeks ago. It was not perfect. There were still tensions, still disagreements, still species who looked at humans with suspicion and fear. But it was a beginning. And now Dohim was going home. There will be a ceremony when we arrive, Tova said. The coalition wants to present you officially as the first ambassador between our peoples. I am not really a diplomat. You befriended 3 Varax cubs by sitting down and scratching their ears. I think you are exactly the right kind of diplomat. Dohyun smiled. It was strange how life worked. 3 months ago, he had been a prisoner, waiting to die in an arena. Now he was an ambassador, standing on the bridge of an alien warship, returning home with a peace treaty and 3 giant pets. His grandmother would have laughed. She always said that patience solved more problems than violence. She had been right. The ship began its descent through Earth's atmosphere. Through the windows, Dohyun could see the clouds parting, revealing the blue ocean below. Somewhere down there was Korea. Somewhere down there was his mother's house, his grandmother's farm. The fields where he had grown up, learning to be gentle with frightened animals. He was bringing that gentleness back now. Not just for himself, but for his whole world. Barham pressed closer against his leg, sensing his emotions. He reached down and scratched behind her ear, the same way he had on that first day in the arena. Her eyes closed, and she made that deep purring sound that still amazed everyone who heard it. The Varax have never left coalition space before, Tova said quietly. There will be concerns. Some of your people may be frightened of them. Then we will show them there is nothing to be afraid of. How? Dohyun thought about his grandmother again. About the wolves that became dogs. About the thousands of years of patience and trust that turned enemies into family. The same way I showed you, he said. One person at a time. One open hand at a time. The ship touched down in a field outside Seoul. Dohyun could see the crowds gathered behind security barriers. Thousands of people who had come to witness this historic moment. There were cameras everywhere, broadcasting to billions more across the planet. The loading ramp lowered. Sunlight streamed in, warm and golden. Dohyun walked down the ramp with Baram at his side. Nuri and Haniel followed close behind, their massive forms casting long shadows across the grass. He could hear the crowd gasping, could see people stepping back in fear. The Varax were terrifying to look at. All those teeth, all those claws, all that power. But Dohyun just kept walking, calm and steady, showing no fear, showing only trust. A small child broke free from the crowd. Before anyone could stop her, she ran forward, curiosity overwhelming her fear. She stopped a few meters away from Haniel, the smallest Varax, and stared up at her with wide eyes. Haniel stared back. Then she lowered her head and made a soft sound, almost like a question. The little girl laughed and reached out to touch Haniel's nose. The crowd went silent. Do-hyun smiled. This was how it started. Not with treaties or speeches or grand ceremonies. It started with a child reaching out to touch something strange and finding that it was not so frightening after all. It started with trust. Behind him, Ambassador Tova stepped off the ramp and looked around at the world humans had built. The cities rising in the distance. The green fields. The blue sky that had given Haniel her name. "It is beautiful," she said. "It is home," Do-hyun replied. And for the first time in 3 long years, that word did not feel like a dream. It felt real. The Varax cubs settled into the grass around him. Their massive bodies relaxed, their amber eyes watching the crowd with curiosity instead of hunger. They had traveled across the stars to reach this place. They had gone from weapons to friends, from monsters to family. Because one human had sat down in an arena and refused to be afraid. Because one human had offered an open hand instead of a closed fist. And because, somewhere in the heart of every creature, even the most dangerous ones, there was a need to belong, a need to be loved, a need to find someone who would scratch behind their ears and tell them everything was going to be okay. That was the message humanity sent to the stars that day. Not a message of power or weapons or war, a message of patience, a message of kindness, a message that said, simply, clearly, across all the vast distances of space, we can be friends. If you let us, the galaxy had a lot to learn about humans. And Park Do-hyun, standing in the sunlight with his 3 giant friends, was happy to teach them.